Welcome back. It is early in the season, so I went back and forth on these power rankings. I honestly have been working on this since finishing the review about 25 minutes ago, trying to figure out okay, who should be where. Considering that I think we've got enough of a sample size now with each team that there's an idea of where they're at, but this is still very early in the season. So there's some dramatic movement because I felt like there has to be dramatic movement. So, that being said, knowing that people are just going to skip to the end and get mad anyways, because that's what happens. That's just how that works. And I'm doing my best here to make sure that this is as accurate as I think we can get right now. At number 32, I think it's accurate, right? So, the Vancouver Canucks, in 32nd, I don't know what else there is to say about the Canucks at this point, but it's tire fire time already. It happens every year. You might as well get it done early so we can move on and do other things. I do wonder what this is going to do to attendance in Vancouver. The fans turned against the game tonight. I do wonder if we're going to start seeing empty seats early if this start continues. Vancouver fans are known to be kind of fickle. So, number 31, not that I can blame them for not wanting to watch something that's as ugly as that Buffalo game was tonight, but number 31, moving up one spot from where they were last week, Arizona. The effort you get with Arizona is always going to be good. The effort's going to be there. I agree with Sheldon Keefe. They don't have the elite talents. And I don't understand why that was so controversial. I'm glad Hockey Night in Canada said the same thing, like, what's the controversy here? I don't understand why people get so upset when coaches call out their team. Boudreau's done it, Keefe's done it, and people get upset. I'm not sure what people expect. Coaches aren't going to be happy with that kind of effort. But in Arizona, there's no expectation. Vancouver, there was. Number 30, a team that drops 4 spots from where they were last week, Anaheim. No expectations with Anaheim this year. They've played well on the road trip. Yes. Are they getting the results? No. And I expect that to be the case with Anaheim for a lot of this year. There may be winning streaks here and there. There may be times that they move out of the bottom row, but I'm expecting them to still miss the playoffs and probably end up last in the division. Probably. Because there's a Canucks team that I think kind of wants that spot. I mean, on the bright side, this is supposed to be a fantastic draft. So if Vancouver is going to have a really bad season, this might be the best time to have it. Number 29, San Jose. So San Jose moves up 2 spots from where they were last week. They did get their first win. I thought they played relatively well against New Jersey. And so, yeah, they end up 29th on this week's board. The win over the Rangers was impressive on some level. I think it also reflected on the Rangers, although, spoiler alert, I don't really punish the Rangers that much for the week they had. And, yeah, so we'll get into that. Number 28, moving up 1 spot from last week, is Columbus. So how do you move up? Well, Vancouver drops. So for Columbus, they had the game against Vancouver where they finally get that win. Because the last time I did this, of course, they were 0-3. Now they're 2-4. But that meltdown against Pittsburgh tonight, it just still feels like for Columbus, this is a work in progress. And yeah, there's some not encouraging numbers coming out of tonight's game. Number 27, dropping 10 spots from last week, Minnesota. So why the dramatic drop? Well, last week I looked at Minnesota and I said, all right, it's 1 week. This worrying trend won't continue, right? But it kind of did. So for Minnesota at this point, we'll see how things turn around for them. Fleury had a decent game today. Boston beats them, of course, in overtime. They did get the win over Vancouver. So since they're 32nd, right, we're already at that point where in the power rankings, if you get a win over the worst team on the board, then I have to weigh that against wins that other teams had against much better competition, right? Even though there are so many records that are similar at this point. Number 26, moving up 4 spots from last week, is New Jersey. Encouraging results for New Jersey. Not the most stellar of competition, but they win, right? So that's the thing. You win the games that you're given. And for New Jersey, I think they're building up some chemistry. Palat looks really good. Blackwood had a really good game today. So I've moved New Jersey up. It's a cautious move up. I know there'll be some Devils fans that are upset that they're too low on the board, but again, at this point, I'm waiting to see them against teams like the Rangers, the Islanders, again, see how things go. They did beat the Islanders, made the Islanders look bad. And it definitely affected the Islanders' standing this week. Number 25, the biggest drop on the board, 11 spots, Nashville. Nashville apparently cannot beat a team that's not San Jose. San Jose is down here, so Nashville drops into the bottom row. I cannot remember a time where Nashville was in the bottom row. I actually cannot remember a time where that's taken place. I don't think it's ever happened, and they have to be better than this. They had expectations too, so while everybody focuses on Vancouver, hey, Nashville's start is really disappointing as well. 0-4-1 since the games in Prague that they won over San Jose. So they've got to figure this out because the Central, it can get away from you fast. Number 24, moving up 4 spots and showing that effort matters, Chicago. Chicago had a decent week. And the funny thing with Chicago is it feels like they have one really bad period each game, and then they recover from it. So if you don't bury them in that one period where they'll get 2 or 3 shots, they don't look very good, they may come back and win. This is a team that I think's unpredictable. They're going to win some games that they're not expected to. I do not see them being a playoff team, but hey, winning games you're not supposed to, that's fun too, right? I can only assume at this point. All right, number 23, also moving up 4 spots from where they were last week, Montreal. So Montreal tonight takes the 5-2 loss against Dallas, but it's a plucky bunch. Elliot Friedman said tonight on Hockey Night in Canada, they're fun to watch. They absolutely are. And that's something I said before the season started. Might be one of the few things I got right. But yeah, Montreal is just as fun to watch as I'd expected. I had expected there to be some really good offense, their defense and goaltending to be spotty in parts. Allen's been better than advertised, even though his stats take a bit of a hit tonight against against Dallas. But yeah, Montreal's out of the bottom row. Kudos to them. Number 22, moving up 1 spot from last week, the LA Kings. The Kings are having trouble keeping the puck out of their net. Velarde's off to a really good start. Quick's been okay. Peterson's been struggling. So there are reasons to be concerned about the Kings at this point. The expectations are higher for them. And now that you see Vegas and Calgary kind of being the two-headed beast at the top, I have no idea who's going to get third in the division. I really honestly have no idea which team's going to get third. It should be Edmonton, right? Or Edmonton should be able to turn this around and get a top 2 spot, but we'll see. Maybe this year the Pacific really is as bad as advertised, and everybody has a terrible record, and then we can all complain about which team gets third and ends up with a playoff spot as a result. Number 21, dropping 2 spots from last week. Bit of a down week for them, and that's the New York Islanders. So the Islanders, the hopes that they'll turn it around are still there, but I think while the loss against Tampa wasn't that bad, the loss against New Jersey was concerning in that they got manhandled by the Devils. The Devils with their speed, and I do expect the Devils to keep moving up. The Islanders could end up being a team that loses out on a spot to New Jersey, right? Where the Islanders don't take that next step, don't get back into the playoffs, and the Devils could end up being that team. So, again, these rankings are still in a tremendous state of flux. I'm hoping that there's less movement next week, but who knows. Number 20, only moving up 1 spot, Seattle. So I'll use this side of the puck. So I'll use that side. Seattle has had a decent run, honestly. 2-2-2. It's not bad. It's better than 0-4-2 over here, right? So for Seattle, they're showing they're not pushovers. So far, they're playing 500 hockey. I know it's NHL 500. Real 500 would be 4-4, not 2-2-2. Or would be 3-3 instead of 2-2-2. So they've only won 2 out of 6 games, but they've gotten points in 4 out of 6. So there are reasons to be optimistic about Seattle. If their goaltending numbers improve, they could be a dark horse. In a division that I just said is wide open, Seattle could be a dark horse. If I'm the Kraken and I watch the results today, I have to be excited about what might happen this year. I have to look and say, you know what? There's a spot there for us. Let's go and grab it. Number 19. Moving up 3 spots from last week are the Capitals. So it's a small climb for the Capitals, but it's a climb. And it feels like they're going to get this back. Kemper had a decent game tonight. They beat the Kings. The interesting thing is they've got a 500 record without Ovechkin being Ovechkin yet. His goal scoring, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned with some of what I'm seeing with Ovechkin, I'll say, over the last couple of weeks. That maybe this is the year we see the goal scoring fall back. Maybe now he's just going to be a 40 goal scorer, but still. The Capitals, I think, are in better shape than expected considering some of the injuries they're dealing with. So, yeah, there you go. Number 18, dropping 2 spots from last week, is Winnipeg. Now, if we only went by the game against Colorado, they stay in the top 2 rows. The game against Colorado, I was like, you know what, this is so good. And then the game against Vegas, I looked and said, you know what, it's back to back. It's Riddick's not Hellebuck. But the game tonight against Toronto, that's a disappointment for Winnipeg, and they end up just dropping behind other teams. So they just got passed. This is something that I know people get mad about with the power rank. Why did my team drop? They got passed. It's not the same thing. It's not a punishment necessarily. It's just these teams I think are playing better right now. So more than anything else. Number 17, also dropping 2 spots from last week, the Detroit Red Wings. Tremendous start to the season, right? But they've sort of come back to earth a little bit. That game against Chicago didn't really go the way they wanted it to. So Detroit finds themselves in the bottom half of the board. But again, there are some teams in the bottom half of the board that, I mean, it's still really early, could find themselves in the top half of the board next week. So we're now into the top half of the board. How do you guys feel? I feel pretty good too. Number 16. What do you mean I hate your team? Number 16, dropping 4 spots. Tampa. So the Tampa Bay Lightning, it has been a concerning start. Now, they win back-to-back games to get back up to the top 2 rows. I had actually had them as low as, I think they were 21st. So it's been all over the place with Tampa. Maybe now they're getting it together. Obviously, Stamkos has had a very good start to the season. Elliott had a very good game tonight after an iffy game in his first appearance. So I really think Tampa Bay puts it together. I don't think they stay in this row for long. And I think we should just act like we're so surprised when they get better and they don't end up being 16th. They're not going to stay 3-3. Number 15, dropping 9 spots from last week. Yeah, big drop for the Oilers. The Oilers lost today against St. Louis. To me, it indicated how well St. Louis is playing and that Edmonton has weaknesses. St. Louis came into this with a game plan. So if I'm playing the Oilers over the next couple of weeks, I would watch the footage of the game against St. Louis and say, all right, what did they do to shut them down? That was a concerning loss. So while Campbell had a good game, and I thought McDavid had his chances as well, things are a little bit out of sync with Edmonton. Again, I expect them to turn it around. They're still in the top half of the board because they beat Carolina this week, so not all is lost there. But yeah, there are some concerning things when it comes to the Edmonton Oilers right now. So we'll see how they turn things around over the next couple weeks. I don't expect them to stay this low. But number 14, moving up 10 spots from last week, Ottawa. Ottawa had, once they get home, it's a different team, right? So, and this is a problem. So they have to be able to take this show on the road and be good on the road. But it has been fun watching their games at home. Now, the win over Boston, obviously, as a Boston fan, I was a little bit, torn on that one because I'd like to see Ottawa back in the playoffs. I love it when Ottawa makes the playoffs, especially when they're an underdog. They tend to do pretty well. But for Ottawa, 14th on the board, I think is fair at this point. They move up the 10 spots from where they were last week, which was here. And I think they're full value for that spot right now. Number 13, moving up 7 spots from last week, Philadelphia. Boy, for Philadelphia, this is starting to feel like it might be sustainable, right? That John Tortorella's come in and has righted the ship. And it's kind of like we all expected this major upheaval, and we're not getting it. We're not getting it at all. The Philadelphia Flyers look legit. That win today over Nashville, that was impressive. Impressive with Carter Hart, and an impressive third period by Philadelphia. So that tells you they're well coached. The goaltending issues they've had, which I've said before, I thought reflected more on the defense than on Carter Hart, but I understand Hart's the guy who's going to take the flack. I think Hart's proving the doubters wrong. Number 12, dropping 10 spots from last week, is Colorado. Colorado has been so wildly inconsistent that I look at the result from Vegas tonight and I say, now that's great. But they lost against Seattle, right? They've lost games recently against teams that you would think they should beat. And it does feel kind of like, I've talked about the cup hangover thing, and it kind of feels like that's still where we're at with Colorado, right? And I really think Colorado's going to turn it around. I do have a pennant on my wall of their Stanley Cup champion status, 2022 Stanley Cup champions pennant. which is not in videos. And I apologize to Avs fans that it doesn't show up in videos, but I still think they're going to turn it around. It's just the win over Vegas could be that catalyst that turns things around for them. Number 11, moving up 7 spots from last week. Who are these Sabres? So the Sabres, I want to say it was 4 years ago that they were top 3 on the power rankings. There was a 10-game winning streak for Buffalo at one point too, where they ended up number 1 on the power rankings. And that was right about where I realized that having a reactive power rankings, which this is going to feel like, where just the result tells you, and it's not necessarily telling you who's playing well, just who won, which are 2 different things, and it's something I've talked about in videos before. But Buffalo is genuinely playing really well. Tuck looks fantastic. Thompson looks excellent. Dahlin's off to a record start. Both of their goaltenders look excellent. There really isn't anything with Buffalo right now that I look at and say, well, that's going to fall apart. I don't know that Comrie and Anderson are strong enough to get this team into the playoffs, but I'm not ruling it out at this point. It definitely looks like this could be a year of unpredictability, and I'm so thankful for that because it's boring when everything goes the way you predict it, right? So we're into the top 10. Number 10 dropping 1 spot from last week, Pittsburgh. Now they haven't lost in regulation yet. What happened to Pittsburgh is they got passed. So for Pittsburgh, they're still kind of in that same spot. They got passed by 1 team. Well, they got passed by 2, but they also passed another. So they passed Colorado, but they got passed by a couple of teams that are playing quite well right now too. But for Pittsburgh, it just, you don't bet against Pittsburgh making the playoffs. Then the question becomes, what does Pittsburgh do in said playoffs? But that's a whole other discussion for April. We're not into April yet, so thankfully we're not into April yet. Number 9. So number 9 on the board, moving up 4 spots from last week, is Boston. I'm surprised by Boston, pleasantly surprised by Boston. So while Vancouver's down here, Boston's been pleasantly surprising me. Even though Swayman's numbers still aren't where I'd like them to be, Boston's playing well. And that win over Minnesota today, that was nice. That was a game that I wasn't sure they wouldn't give away, and they didn't. So, yeah, Boston ends up almost in the top row. Pretty darn close. Their record is solid now. And so, yeah, we'll see how things go from here. I am concerned about them playing down to opponents they should beat, but it's still early in the season to really get into that. Number 8, dropping 1 spot from last week, just the 1 spot, and that's Toronto. Toronto had a decent week. And so for the Maple Leafs, it definitely looks like they're going to be a playoff team, and B, may end up being a team that ends up winning the Atlantic. It could happen. I do think they end up moving up next week. I'd be surprised if they don't. They got passed by 1 team. Yeah, they got passed by 2 actually, but they passed Colorado. So the Avs were very accommodating in making sure teams didn't fall down that far on this week's power rankings. So number 7, one of the teams that passes Toronto is Vegas. Vegas Golden Knights. I did see fans complaining in Vegas about Vegas' standing last week at number 11. They move up 4 spots this week. Well, last week when I did the power rankings, they hadn't really beaten anybody of note. Their first 3 games weren't that difficult. So this week, of course, they lost against Calgary, but that was a good game. And so, yeah, I think Vegas is playing quite well. They did lose against Colorado, but I still think they're playing well. So that's the thing, is that it's not just results based when it comes to who's where on the power rankings from one week to the next. It's who's playing really well right now. Number 6, which is why Vancouver's 32nd. Number 6, Dallas. Dallas Stars. They move up 4 spots as well. I'm very surprised, pleasantly, by how well Dallas is playing. And it's not just the Robertson line this year. So Robertson, Pavelski, Hintz, they really leaned on that line. But they're getting some really good play from guys like Marchment. Delandry has been pretty good. Wyatt Johnston's been decent as a rookie as well. And Ottinger's picking up where he left off in the playoffs. Yeah, Dallas, I'm very surprised how well they're playing. I don't know how long this can go for, but I'm enjoying the ride while it lasts because Vancouver. So you might as well enjoy the games that you can enjoy while you can, because eventually you have to watch Vancouver, and then your mood might change. So there's that. Number 5, Florida. So Florida drops 4 spots from where they were last week. And yeah, Florida, it's been Interesting watching them early in the season. I think that if the blue line can hold up, which is going to be difficult because they traded Uyghur, now they've lost Ekblad, and the defensive depth is not quite where it was last year. But yeah, Florida's still one of the better teams in the league. I do expect them to be right there at the end of the season. Both Bobrovsky and Knight are playing well. I think they're going to be dangerous. So Florida ends up fifth on the board. Number four, and I've gone back and forth about where to place the top four teams. So if people want to get upset about the fact that certain teams haven't shown up yet, okie dokie. Fourth spot, Carolina. Carolina loses back-to-back games. And Carolina, I still think, is going to be very good this year. So I think that tells you that both Alberta teams can pull off the wins. They lost in overtime tonight. That was a very spirited game against Calgary. There were opportunities where Carolina could have won that game. So I'm not going to penalize them for that. I'm not going to penalize them for the game against Edmonton, which was entertaining as well. A little bit sloppy defensively by Carolina's standards, but it's still early in the season. And so Carolina's going into Vancouver on Monday. We'll see how that goes. That'll be interesting. Number three, moving up one spot from last week, are the Rangers. The Rangers are playing. They're playing some solid hockey. The results, not as great this week as they were the first week, but I still think the Rangers are playing well. The offense is there. The defense is excellent. The goaltending. Shesterkin hasn't quite been Shesterkin yet. His numbers aren't as solid as last year, but they're still pretty darn good. So I do think that the New York Rangers, the Carolina Hurricanes are going to be the best two teams in that division, although New Jersey is going to give teams fits. Clearly, New Jersey wants out of that bottom row, and we'll see if that happens next week. Now, at number two, moving up 6 spots from last week, St. Louis. So, for St. Louis, they go into Edmonton today and just made it look not easy, but they made it look as easy as a team can. And they're 3-0 on the season, so they're the only undefeated team left in the league. And yeah, they're impressive. They haven't played as many games as everybody else, but on some level, I'm seeing that as just as impressive because they're still sharp, even though they've had those days off. You could totally understand a team having time off, being a little flat and not coming out all that well against a team that's into the rhythm of a game every other day, which is where players want it to be. Every other day you'd have a game. But yeah, St. Louis has been very sharp, and they haven't had a bad game yet. So I felt like, okay, St. Louis kind of has to be number 2 on the board, which means number 1, moving up 4 spots from last week, Calgary. Now I'm using the Atlanta Flames puck, absolutely. But hey, that's allowed. That's okay. It's still a Flames puck. People know I mean the Calgary Flames. They know Atlanta hasn't played a game as the Flames since 1980, so there shouldn't be any confusion about the fact that that's Calgary. Moving up 4 spots, and this was the thought process I went through, was asking myself, of the teams in this top row, which team has impressed me the most over the last week? And it's Calgary. That's even with the loss against Buffalo. They bounced back tonight. They beat Carolina. They came from behind to do that. The one concern with Calgary might be starting on time. They're not alone in that. There's definitely some concerns around the league with teams not starting on time or not finishing very well. 2-goal leads are, well, they're not easy to maintain. But yeah, so there you go. There's your power rankings for this week. I do expect some dramatic moves again next week, but I did my best. Like I said, I went over this board. I went over it and over it and over it in my mind, and I know there's people who aren't going to be happy with it. It's early in the season. Not that people are happy with it later in the season either. It's just a thing that happens with power rankings. But thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And if you skip to the end, it's a shame because I explained every placement on the board, as I do every week. Thank you guys so much for watching, even the hate watchers, because it still drives the numbers. It still tells the algorithm people like it. So there you go. Thanks for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.